What's up, everybody? Welcome into the first NBA live stream with me this season. I was not on the one you did with James last week. So this is the first one for me. Bales and I are back. We'll also have James in the mix quite a bit this season. We'll probably do some three-mans. We'll have some of me and James, and then obviously me and Bales and Bales and James as well. We'll mix it around a little bit. So excited to be back for another NBA season. If you guys could post in chat for me real quick so that we can tell if we can see the questions, that would be very helpful. But other than that, I mean, we're going to stick to like the same kind of format that we had in the past. We're going to go position by position, and then we'll kind of go over some overall slate thoughts towards the end of the podcast. This is an interesting slate. So it's only 5 games, which seems a little bit low for a Monday, especially with the season just starting. But things are still kind of weird with it being Christmas. Obviously, we have New Year's later this week. So only 5 games and a ton of injury news. So some of the big ones, Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose are out for the Pistons, which is going to open up a ton of value on their team. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Spencer Dinwiddie all out for the Nets, which opens up a ton of value on the Nets and really bumps up Karis LeVert, someone that we like to play a lot in the bubble. We need to monitor the news on the Lakers because there's a good chance that LeBron sits out tonight, which is probably news that we're not going to get until after lock, which could really help late swapping. I don't know, Bills, if you played NBA yesterday, but there was a ton of news after lock yesterday, and people did not use late swap. Like, I know like it didn't really work out, but like when Joel Embiid got ruled out, I figured the 76ers guys like Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, even Dwight Howard, those guys would be pretty chalky. They were not high owned at all. People did not utilize late swap yesterday, probably because they were watching football, but still something we can use to our advantage. And then all the guys for the Rockets are out again. They're missing like 6, 7 guys, namely DeMarcus Cousins, John Wall. So we get the same situation with the Rockets that we saw over the weekend, which makes James Harden and Christian Wood some of the top plays on the slate. Is there any other like big injuries I'm missing? I know there's like some other ones that we could get to, but I think those are really like the big ones.
Yeah, I think you covered all the major ones, which are a ridiculous amount. But no, I think we should be about. Did you say Jaren Jackson Jr. is out? Like he's
Yeah,
obviously out.
he's out again. Obviously Clark. I don't know. Do you have a ton of interest in that game? Other than like obviously the Nets guys, but I mean Grizzlies wise, other than Jamal Murray, I don't really know who I like there.
Yeah, it seems like just John Morant basically. I think you can always play Jonas Valanciunas because you can go for 70 basically any night. But I'm not really going to. I know a lot of people like Kyle Anderson because he's coming off of arguably his best game as a pro. It's just I don't know. It's not a ton that I like. I will say Grayson Allen, absolutely hate the guy, but he's playing like slightly under 30 minutes and he's under 4,000. So if he gets hot, he can score decent. So I wouldn't be opposed to playing him. I just can't stand the guy.
Yeah, a lot. He's been playing like 30 minutes, even in the preseason. So definitely could be considered, I guess, in tournaments. But we're gonna get into it. We're gonna start at point guard. There's some very clear chalk value at point guard, which we're going to talk about, Bales. But if we're looking at the top tier, we're obviously going to use DraftKings. If you guys have FanDuel specific questions, go ahead and ask. We can answer them. But we're going to use DraftKings pricing for the overall breakdown. You have James Harden, 11,200. Lock of the slate, I would probably, if I was running 150 lineups, I would probably have 100% James Harden. I don't really see a reason. I don't really see a reason to fade him. So you're pretty much locking him in. And then you have Damian Lillard at 10-3, Trae Young at 9,500, and then down to John Morant, CJ McCollum, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the 8K range. So what are you doing outside of Harden? Because I don't really think we need to dive too deep into why Harden is like the best play on the slate. But I actually like quite a few of these other point guards at the top tier.
Yeah, I like the top tier guys too. If you're looking at like over, let's just say 8,000. I think that my number 2 behind Harden would be Trae Young, then probably Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then John Morant. And I think like if you're running a lot of lineups, you can sprinkle in like Damian Lillard, maybe CJ McCollum, but I feel like you're probably chasing points with him. Mainly though, it's really just Trey. If I wouldn't be going Harden, I definitely would be going Trey Young. Gilgeous-Alexander, I do think you can pair with Harden because at 8K, it's not going to be overly difficult to get him in, whereas Trey Young at 9.5 is going to be a little tougher. And this answers one of the questions. It was Harden, LeVert, and Young, the core plays today. Harden and LeVert, I would say yes, are core plays. Trey Young, I wouldn't necessarily say an absolute must, just because he's a little bit pricey and it's going to be harder to get him in. Do you have any are you agreeing that Harden and LeVert were probably locking in, and then Trey Young is more or less tournament option?
Yeah, so my building blocks article went up before we got on stream. I had James Harden, Karis LeVert, and Christian Wood as my building blocks, and then I kind of wrote up some of the value plays. So I do think Harden and LeVert. I do think the way that, at least the way I was building on DraftKings before we got on here, obviously it's only 5 o'clock, so a lot can happen in 2.5 hours before lock. But with all the value, I think you can fit the Rockets guys with LeVert and one other stud. So I think you kind of have to pick if you want Lillard, Trey Young, Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, someone like that. I think you can. I think you can make it work if you want to. So if you want to play Trey Young, I think Trey Young is a really good play. I would definitely have him second behind Harden at point guard as well. I have no issues with him. Feels like we haven't got that big game from him yet. Obviously, it's only been a couple games, but really good matchup to do it against Detroit. So I have no problems with him, and he's under 10K, which I like. He has had the ball in his hands slightly less than last season, which I don't know really. Like we'll have to wait and see really what that does to like his ceiling. But he's gonna take as many shots as he wants, and the matchup is good. So I do like Trey Young. Gilgeous-Alexander I think is a good play at 8K. I think he might slip like under the radar a little bit in terms of ownership as we get closer to lock. He had the ball in his hands a ton, which we figured was going to happen with Chris Paul out of town, with Dennis Schroeder out of town. The offense is going to run through him. The matchup is tough against Utah, but I mean I think what we expect from him this year, like he isn't a guy. Last year, he was kind of the guy that he needed to score the ball a lot to really have a big game. I think with what his role is going to be this year, he might not have to be as scoring dependent, right? Like I think he's going to be able to contribute in other ways with the way he's going to play. So I do think 8K is a good price for him, even in a tough matchup.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Gilgeous-Alexander is honestly one of the better plays, and you can just kind of see like he shot 8 of 20 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3, which I don't anticipate him being like an elite 3-point shooter or anything, but he still scored over 45 fantasy points. So 8K is a little cheap for him. I think he's one of the better options, but it does seem like Harden, Trey Young, and Gilgeous-Alexander are a tier above anyone else, and then I would put Jamal Murray in the next slot below them for the high price guys.
Yeah, and Moran is another really good tournament play. I mean, people are going to be jamming in these like Nets value plays and LeVert, so it makes sense in tournaments to get Moran on the other side. Should be a fast-paced game, which obviously fits kind of his skill set. And I don't know, you could just easily see him having a big game. Like, who is going to stop him on the Nets right now, right? Like, probably nobody.
No. Yeah, I agree with that. Answering some of these questions, Killian Hayes, personally, I'm okay with him. I prefer DeLon Wright if I'm picking between the two, but I don't really have any issues with Hayes because with Rose out, he's going to have to get run. Josh Jackson's going to get a decent amount of run. Kuzma will get solid run if LeBron's out. If LeBron's starting, he's pretty much an automatic fade. I really like DeLon Wright. Ben shares the idea. He's way too cheap. And then people are just kind of asking about cheap point guards, so we can move there.
Yeah, we'll head down to the value tier. It's really like the Pistons guys, right? You have DeLon Wright and Killian Hayes. I think Hayes is fine in tournaments, but I mean, it kind of sounds like they want the ball to be in Wright's hands at least early on in the season, while Hayes is kind of learning. I mean, he played a ton of minutes. Obviously, that game went to double overtime, but played a lot of minutes. I mean, they're both cheap. but I think Wright is probably the guy that you want in cash, and I think he's going to be higher owned. Before we switch over, you can tell me if you like any other value point guards, because I think it's pretty clearly like the Pistons guys. I don't love any of these other guys, but about what you said about Kuzma, like James and I were kind of talking about this before we got on here, and he kind of wrote it in his entry article this morning. I do think that like Kuzma gets a bigger bump when Anthony Davis is out rather than LeBron. So it's not to say that Kuzma's a bad play, but on DraftKings he's up to 61. Like I don't think there's any value in that price tag. So he's probably not someone I'm considering like in cash games. In tournaments, yeah, you can get some exposure to him, but I don't know. I don't like that price tag a lot for him.
Yeah, I agree. Other point guards, we didn't mention him because he's kind of higher priced and we dropped straight to value, but Jamal Murray is playing big minutes and we all saw what he can do in the bubble. It kind of, I don't want to say it sucks, but Jokic is getting so much usage that Murray really isn't doing everything that we know that he can. With that said, he's 7,100 and we saw CJ McCollum really get into a shootout with James Harden the other night. So realistically, we could see Murray also get in that. And then if you want like just a ridiculous play that I don't think you have to go to, but isn't the worst thing, Theo Maledon is only 3,100 and he's likely to get around 20 minutes for the Thunder. You don't really have to go there because there's so much value in Detroit and Brooklyn. But I do think if you want to kind of get weird in a large field GPP, there are worse options than grabbing him and hoping that he goes off.
Yeah, Murray especially would be interesting. Kind of like I said, like we're going to be playing a lot of Rockets guys, so it would make sense to want someone on the other side of that game. We'll move to shooting guard. You have Harden here, obviously at the top, which we kind of talked about as being the lock of the slate. And then you have McCollum, Mitchell, Karis LeVert, Will Barton, and Dennis Schroeder. Schroeder, I think, would definitely be interesting in tournaments if LeBron sits out, which we'll probably get that news after lock, like we said. LeVert has to be considered a lock as well. Obviously, he has multi-position eligibility, so you could play him at small forward. But this is a guy that we saw the Nets run the offense through in the bubble. He's posted 30+% usage rates in the past. Now he's going to have no Dinwiddie, no Kevin Durant, no Kyrie Irving tonight. Like, the ball is clearly going to be in his hands. Is there any reason that you would not want to play LeVert tonight, even in tournaments at his price?
No, I'm probably just locking him and moving on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard not to play him. Mitchell, I think I'm out on. Like, it's not a great matchup. I'm assuming they'll put Lou Dort on him, which we kind of saw in the bubble. He could be pretty good defensively. And I don't know. Donovan Mitchell's just the guy that I never get right. I don't know if like, I'm sure everyone listening and you have these guys right. But it's just like every time you play him, they just don't do anything. And Mitchell is that guy for me. McCollum, I do think it's interesting. Anthony had a monster night in NBA. I think that was Saturday night. He ended up going CJ McCollum over Damian Lillard, and it was that overtime game against the Rockets. So, I do think he's in play at 8,100, but him and Lillard are kind of secondary tournament plays for me. What's your thoughts on Schroeder and just like any cheap guys? Because there is like, you can use Wright at shooting guard on DraftKings. You have Grayson Allen, who we kind of mentioned. I don't know. Is there any cheap guys? Nawaba, I think, is interesting. He was third on the Rockets in usage rate in that first game. I played him in cash that Saturday night, but now it kind of seems like with all the other value, no one's really looking at him.
Yeah, I'm fine with pretty much any of them. I'll say I like Donovan Mitchell more than you just because I know Dort's good, but in NBA, like you can get basically anyone off of you whenever you want.
Yeah,
and
people definitely overrate individual matchups for sure.
Yeah. And that Thunder defense as a whole just isn't going to be good. Like if I'm going to avoid someone for a defensive matchup, it's going to be like as a whole the Utah Jazz, just a very good whole defense. But I think Mitchell's fine. As a cheaper guy, I think Spy is fine. He should get like 25 minutes tonight. He's 3,600, and obviously we know that he can just shoot the lights out when he's on. Besides that, I mean, I don't know, honestly, dude. It's kind of difficult to like really any of these guys outside of it seems like the top three options of Harden, LeVert, and Talon Wright are just so much better than literally every other play that you just kind of go there. I guess Bogdan Bogdanovich I'm fine with. He's getting solid minutes. He just hasn't been great.
Yeah. Definitely a bunch of tournament plays in that range, but I think like with the value that we have, you don't really need to go too crazy unless you're um, like playing 150 lineups. We can move over to small forward. You can start off here. I don't know who are you looking at small forward because I'm assuming I'm gonna have Levert there on DraftKings since he has that multi-position eligibility, and I want to play Harden and Delon Wright, so I'll probably be playing Levert there in cash. Michael Porter Jr. I don't think anyone will want to play because he kind of let people down on Christmas Day, but I would be fine putting him in the tournament range along with Kuzma at 6,100. Jeremy Grant I think is a strong tournament play. Most people will focus on the really cheap Pistons, but I do think Grant could especially be interesting with Rose and Griffin out.
Yeah, I agree. I think two cash options that I would be 100% fine with are Josh Jackson. He's just going to see more minutes. And then the other one, which I believe is the reason you want me to start this bad boy off, is Sekou Doumbia, which I don't even know if I'm even coming close to pronouncing that right. But I mean, he might actually end up being the highest owned player on the entire slate. I feel like, I don't know, you might just play him at power forward or whatever, but just an elite play. Him and Josh Jackson together, I have no issues with that whatsoever. Other options, realistically, I think it's fine with Kyle Anderson, but you are kind of chasing fantasy points because he's not going to do that every single night, but it does look like he's going to have a pretty big role in their offense. Derek Jones Jr. at only 4K, he's going to play roughly 30 minutes. He's a fine tournament play. And then Bogdan Bogdanovich, he's really struggled shooting to start the season, but again, I'm not really worried about the Thunder. And if you look at how fast they played in their first matchup, it seems like they're just going to be running this year. And if Bogdanovich can score against you, he comes with quite a bit of upside.
Yeah, you highlighted it pretty well. There's a ton of good value plays at this position. You have Nawaba, you have the Pistons guys. Nawaba more for tournaments. You have Joe Harris in that mid tier. Like there's a lot of I think ownership gonna go on the value plays here. And then two more guys that I really like. I like Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot a lot. So he's not projecting, like he's not popping in our projections. I don't think he's going to be high owned, but he played like almost the whole fourth quarter in the Nets' last game. And this is someone that was really good in the bubble. I know he's not super high up in their rotation, but I do think he's going to get on the floor tonight with these guys out for the Nets. So I think he's interesting at 3,100 at potentially low ownership. And then Talon Horton Tucker, our boy from the preseason. We pretty much played him every night in preseason, but if LeBron was out, I think that that would give them reign to kind of unleash him. They kind of got him going late in that game last night. Both of them are 3,100, and I think they're really strong value plays. The problem with Horton Tucker is we would need that LeBron news to play him, and we're not going to get it after lock. So that could be someone that swapping onto could be a really good move, I think, in tournaments.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right, we'll move to power forward. If you guys have any questions on any of the positions, obviously, you can ask and we will answer them. We also should mention Taurean Prince. You could play at power forward as well. Another Nets player that's projecting for decent ownership. At the top of power forward, you have Anthony Davis, John Collins, Montrezl Harrell, and Michael Porter Jr. Really, like that's the top guys. Kuzma's right there at 6,100. So AD, I think, is one of the best tournament plays on the slate. Would obviously get a huge bump if LeBron's out. Don't think he's going to be high owned. So again, that's someone that you could swap onto after lock if we get that LeBron sitting news. And at 10,100, I mean, I don't see why he shouldn't crush Portland. Like obviously, Covington is like a fine defender, but Anthony Davis should have his way with the Blazers, right? So I think potentially with no LeBron could be a really good tournament play. Collins is kind of in no man's land for me. Like I prefer going down to Levert at small forward or something rather than playing Collins, and I think Capela's back, so that would potentially hurt Collins as well because we kind of like Collins when he's going to get those minutes at center. So Capela being out would obviously hurt that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know if you're paying up, you're basically just playing Anthony Davis and moving on. Really, even like Montrezl Harrell got pretty much too high of a bump, if you ask me. I guess if he's playing major minutes, it's fine. But it seems like anytime the Lakers blow out, they're going to give their guys a little bit of rest, even guys like Harrell that don't need it. One guy that I like at 5,700 is Darius Bazley. I played him the first night I wrote him up the first night, obviously, or the first night that he had a game, then obviously got canceled against the Rockets. And then I played him against Charlotte. It's way too cheap. 5,700 is way too cheap for him. He's actually a really good player that oddly people don't know about, but he was a first round pick. He would have been much higher had he gone to college. I think that 57 is way too cheap for him. I posted in our Discord the night that he played until he gets to 7K. I'm just going to keep playing him. And tonight, I think he's a really good play. I just don't know if you can get him in your lineup the way that the other forwards are going because there's so much value. And then outside of him, I mean, Taurean Prince and Jeff Green are both going to get some ownership. I don't love either one of them, but I understand why you would play both. Jason Tate at 4,100 is going to play big minutes, so I have no issues there, really. Jeremy Grant, we already kind of talked about a little bit. I'm cool with that. I think that's about it that I'm really looking at for power forward. Is there anyone else that you would be interested in playing?
No, you pretty much covered it. I completely agree with your thoughts on like Jeff Green. Like Jeff Green's popping in like every projection I've seen. Before we hopped on the stream, I don't really see why he's a great play today, even with Durant out. Like I don't think that really affects him a ton. I would much rather play TLC than him or Prince. Though if I was picking one of Jeff Green and Prince, I would probably pick Prince. I think Bazley's a great tournament play, kind of like you said. We both played him in the Thunder's first game, so I do think he's a strong tournament play. And then you kind of have a bunch of those other value plays that we talked at small forward. Like you can use them at power forward as well. Tate, I think it's interesting in tournaments. I mean, he's going to be on the floor, right? They just don't have anyone else, but definitely someone that's kind of scoring dependent. Like you're going to need him to score some points if he's going to do anything fantasy wise.
Yeah, that's basically all he does.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't do anything else, but I digress. We'll go to center to close it out. Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, Jonas Valanciunas, John Collins, Harrell, Rudy Gobert, Christian Wood. Those are kind of the top guys here. So I think how I'm breaking this down is Christian Wood is pretty much a lock for me tonight with, the Rockets team makeup right now. And I mean, people will think, I don't know, Denver has this reputation as some great defensive team. They have not been good defensively in almost a year. I'm pretty sure their defensive rating in the bubble was bottom 2 or 3. They haven't been good defensively in their first couple games this year. And Jokic is not as athletic or quick as Christian Wood, so I don't think I think they're a bad matchup for each other. I think Christian Wood's probably a little bit too athletic and fast for Jokic to cover. And I also think that Jokic is kind of too big and really crafty for Wood to handle on the other side. So I think it's a good matchup for both of them. But as far as DraftKings goes, this has to be a double center night. Am I right? Because we didn't even talk about Plumlee, who's projecting for high ownership as well.
Yeah, I think. I think in cash games you're just running double center. I don't think you necessarily have to in tournaments or anything though.
Yeah, Jokic I think is one of my favorite plays on the slate. We were talking about before we started the stream, but just we're gonna be playing Rockets guys. It would make sense to get someone on the other side. And dude, look at his minutes. The first two games, 42 and 38 minutes. It's kind of tough for me to not think he has a big game tonight if he's playing, that kind of minutes.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. That's also what I was kind of thinking with Jamal Murray.
Yeah. I mean, you can stack both of them for sure. I have no problems with that.
Quickly, I'm going to answer some of these questions and bring them up. Kyle Kuzma on FanDuel is 4,200. That's actually a good play. Yeah, we just don't really like him that much.
He was 42 on FanDuel last night, and we locked him. So, yeah.
Thoughts on Clint Capela? You basically can't play him because he's only supposed to play around 20 as he gets back into it. So I would say Capela probably hurts Mason Plumlee a little bit because he's so good defensively, but you can't really use him. So I would advise that you don't play Capela. Gobert, I'm completely fine with on FanDuel, where he's 77. A lot of people are asking about Jared Allen. So how do you feel about Jarrett Allen tonight.
Yeah, I mean, he played, I think, 25 minutes in the Nets last game. You would assume, like, with Durant out and with Kyrie out, like, I think DeAndre's going to play, but, that's someone that probably won't play full minutes. Like, do you agree with that?
Yeah, it would be weird, honestly, if they basically benched all the other old guys and then just like fed these minutes to DeAndre
Yeah.
Jordan.
Yeah, so if we're assuming that DeAndre probably plays a little bit limited minutes, no one's playing Jared Allen, right? They're all going for Jeff Green, Torian Prince, like the cheap guy, Levert, obviously, but they're going for the cheap forwards. So Jared Allen is in a price range that's going to naturally differentiate your lineup because he's at a weird spot at center when people are spending up or they're playing Plumlee, and it's just a natural pivot off of Plumlee, who is around the same price tag. So I have no issues with playing Allen in tournaments. It's just not someone you could use in cash, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ozzy, no, we don't have literally any concerns about Joker's defense against Christian Wood. Wood is a lock for both of us.
Do you agree that like Jokic just isn't athletic enough to keep up with him? Like I feel like Wood will just go right by him.
There's no way he's gonna.
Yeah.
He'll do literally. He's gonna get the ball right inside the 3-point, and then he's just gonna run right past him.
Yeah, that's what.
And he's probably gonna do it over and over. Couple guys here. Would you go Michael Porter Jr. or Jeremy Grant?
Oh, that's tough. I would play Jeremy Grant. I think they'll both be relatively lower owned.
I think the same thing. Let's see where we at here. Thoughts on Mike Muscala? Personally, yeah, I don't see much reason to use Mike Muscala, but he's 3,100. It's not like the worst play on the entire slate, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's other guys I like at 3,100 more, even if they're at other positions. I'll just pass.
Yeah, that's what I think too, because you're going to play Christian Wood at center, so it's not like you need 3,100 for a center.
Yeah, and if you were going to play double center, like you're sacrificing like all those great plays that we just talked about to go down to him.
All right, sorry I'm a bit late on this. Gerard, send over to our Twitter, DFS_karma, and let them know that you'd be interested, and they'll get set up with some stuff for you. We do not currently have a promo code for the NBA monthly, but if you purchase an NBA weekly, you get a free week of the optimizer for the first week that you get it. Favorite center on FanDuel, Ben?
Oh, man. Okay, that's actually an interesting question because you can only play one. So I'm kind of wondering, like, I haven't checked ownership, at least for FanDuel. Obviously, I kind of start out with DraftKings, similar to what I do with football, and then kind of switch over. So as far as, like, ownership goes, I mean, Jokic is 10K. I would like to get to him if possible. I think, like, Nurkic, I don't know if he was, like, kind of owned the other night because he's so cheap, 6,800.
Yeah.
And then Plumlee 6K. I mean, I'll probably just say Joker and try and get him in with the Rockets guys, I think.
Yeah, I think the two that stand out on FanDuel are Joker and Plumlee. Also, yeah, Dylan Brooks' price on FanDuel is ridiculous. You can just lock him in. That's another easy lock.
Yeah, definitely.
Corey, no, it's I get what you're saying, but Joker playing away from the rim, I don't think is going to limit Wood because Wood's going to get his in a variety of ways. It's not like he solely needs.
He just has to. Like he has to get his. Like they don't have anyone else right now. So if you plug Harden, Wood, and Joker on FanDuel, that leaves you like 5K left. You could probably pretty easily make a lineup like that.
That's what I think. Joseph, I'm not worried about Christian Wood fouling Joker in the paint because Christian Wood plays literally less than no defense, and you can't foul if you're not playing.
And
defense,
he doesn't even try on defense.
He just stands there. He gets bodied. He lets him. Yeah. Thoughts on Al Horford? I don't think I will ever recommend Al Horford again in my life.
Wow.
I don't think you have to use him, especially against Utah. Al Horford's not on my list.
Someone clipped that. There's going to be a slate this year, like where just all these Thunder guys are out, and you're just like, I'm jamming in Al Horford.
No,
and I'm going to bring
I gotta play Al Horford.
I'm going to bring that clip up.
Josh Jackson over Jayshawn Tate. Do you agree? Just Josh
Oh
Jackson's a
yeah,
much better
yeah. In
fantasy
in
player.
cash, like for sure. And tournaments, probably yeah. Like if you needed the $100, you could play Tate. But yeah, I mean, if you could just pick either of them, it's Josh Jackson.
Dylan Brooks is a good play on FanDuel, like basically a must start on FanDuel. Dylan Brooks is a decent play on DraftKings. I don't think you're really going to need to go there. He's 55. If you have questions about literally any of the positions, you can go back and rewatch the stream once it's done. We outlined everyone that we like at each position. Went over a lot of FanDuel stuff that we normally don't really. We just usually stick to DraftKings, but we went over both of them. So if you're specifically asking questions about positions, you can just go back and rewatch this as soon as we end it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much does it. We talked about all the positions. Give me like a bold call for tonight, or like who's someone that, like, we'll say no Rockets guys, but who's someone that you have to put in your lineups tonight besides the Rockets guys, and no Levert too, because it's just obvious.
I want to say Sekou because he's just going to go off. And then I want to say Josh Jackson because he's also, but they're so obvious. I'm going to go with Talon Wright, and I'm also going to say he drops 40 plus.
40 plus, okay. I'll say Jokic because I've kind of talked myself into that. Like I have to play him.
Quick couple more questions that came in before we get going. Utah stack, do you like that for tournaments? Personally, I'm okay with it because I don't really like Oklahoma City, their defense, and I do think they're going to run more. So
yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it in tournaments. It'll definitely be low owned, so I wouldn't make that like my only team though.
Yeah, I agree with that. Landry Shamet, any interest whatsoever?
There's too many other value plays, I think. Watch, he'll probably like drop like 30 or something insane like that he would never do in his life.
I was thinking the same thing. If you had to pick one, Christian Wood, Karis LeVert. I think LeVert for me.
Oh man, had to pick one.
No, I think never mind. I'm going to Wood. I'm going Christian Wood.
Yeah, if you can only have one, it's Wood for sure, I think.
I would do everything you can to possibly get both of those guys.
Yeah, like you really want Harden, Wood, and LeVert, but if for some reason you couldn't play one, like you need the two Rockets guys, I think, above anything else.
And last question, Talon Wright or Dillon Brooks? I think I would go with Talon Wright.
Yeah, it's Talon Wright, and on FanDuel, Talon Wright is shooting guard, and he's 4,200. Just so you know.
Really good play, but the problem on FanDuel, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but shooting guard has James Harden, Talon Wright's 4,200, Dillon Brooks is 37.
Yeah, why is Dillon Brooks 3,700? So, speaking
now,
of that though, so that actually could be a way to get low ownership on Talon Wright, because we saw this exact situation last night on FanDuel. All the projection systems that people were using rated out Ish Smith as this great play on FanDuel, even though Raul Neto was starting, but everyone just used Ish Smith because of like the projection systems they were using, and we used Raul Neto in our core plays, and he did really good, but he was super chalk on DraftKings, but he wasn't owned on FanDuel. So this could be this exact same situation. If everyone's playing Dillon Brooks, you can play Talon Wright and maybe get him a little bit lower owned on FanDuel.
Yeah, because everyone's going James Harden. Like that, James Harden is close to lock.
So I would assume Brooks is chalk right at that price, correct?
Yeah, Dillon Brooks. I think Dillon Brooks, James Harden is the cash route, but I think that Talon Wright, James Harden is 100% fine for tournaments.
Yeah, I think that's a good move. Thank you guys for watching. It was a good first stream. I'll be back tomorrow, I think. I don't know how many games are tomorrow. I would assume there's a fine amount of games, but I'll be back with stream tomorrow. If you guys have any other questions, you can hit us up in Discord, and good luck this night.